Welcome to the College Football Debrief on the CFB on OSG with your host, the Online Sports Guys.
Thank you, Tommy Palmer, and welcome to the College Football Debrief. It's ACC time. John Wilkerson in the padded room. Across the way, Anthony Goldman. And look who joins us, Corey McCartney from Fox Sports South.
Yeah, the man, the myth, the legend. There you
go. Last time he was on the show, I told him he needs to be on the payroll. I think we're going to get the paperwork signed pretty soon.
I need to be on the payroll.
Okay, we're talking ACC this week. Whenever I think about the ACC heading into this season, I always think about what the Big 8 conference was like in the late 70s, early 80s when Nebraska and Oklahoma were trading conference championships. That conference was known as the Big 2, Little 6. And so when I think of ACC right now, I think ACC is an acronym for Another Clemson Championship.
Yes.
There you go.
I mean,
it's the whole story with the ACC right now is will anyone even come close into the stratosphere of catching up with Clemson? Obviously, it won't happen this year, but even looking further down the road, 2 or 3 years, I mean, there's no program at the moment that you even see laying down the groundwork to even start that path.
Well,
I mean, it feels like they're just miles ahead of everybody. And, you know, Manny Diaz at Miami could possibly be the one, but the ones that you would look at, Virginia Tech, Florida State, they've got so many of their own issues that it just seems like they're lapping the field right now in this conference.
Well, when you look at position groups nationally, Clemson's top 3 quarterback, top 3 running back. They have maybe 2 top 10 receivers. We're just talking about skill positions there.
Yeah.
And then defensively, yeah, they had a lot of losses, but the guys that are replacing them are probably on par talent level and ability level, and if they're behind a little bit, it's not by much. And when you look at those lists, it's hard to find any more ACC athletes on those lists. They've done a great job recruiting.
It's funny because we talk about the Clemson stranglehold. Syracuse is coming off a 10-win season.
Yeah.
You know, and you're not even considering them a legitimate threat to Clemson. That's just I mean, you know, Tommy DeVito looks like he could be a star at QB for them, but Clemson's just so deep everywhere. You know what you're getting with them. It's just a funny position for the rest of the Atlantic Division to be in because it's like, what hope do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's funny about this time of year is, you know, everybody when they're making predictions, they like to go, you know, well, what does Team X have to do to make the playoff? What does the Pac-12 have to do to get a team in? Can the SEC get to? I mean, that's the fun scenarios we like to talk. The scenario that I would ask is, what does Clemson have to do to not make the playoff? I mean, I think even if let's just say they fell asleep, they go to the Carrier Dome, that Syracuse is going to be, like you said, the biggest game that they probably play on their schedule. So they're not going to sleepwalk. But let's just say, for argument's sake, they have an injury 2 years ago, repeats when they were up there, and they get beat in a close game. Even with one loss, they're still in.
And the thing with Clemson, too, or the ACC, is if not Clemson, then who?
Right.
You know, that's the thing. That is much as this is the storyline for this conference is chasing a third national championship under Dabo Swinney. If it doesn't happen, this conference just does not have another team to take that next step up.
No.
You're right.
And it's weird to think, okay, you've got a legitimate year-in, year-out national championship contender.
Right.
And if they don't deliver, then your conference is not contending for one.
Well, I find it interesting. We're about, 5-6 years since Florida State won their national title with Jameis Winston.
Yep.
Clemson was kind of on the precipice of being what Clemson is now. So it looked like you had 2 national championship caliber programs, and you had these up-and-coming programs in the ACC, and there was a lot of optimism about the strength of this league in football. And here we are 6 years later, and we've got a super team, and then we've got a bunch of mediocre teams that are just fighting for the scraps.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like you say, even when Florida State was winning national championships and competing, Clemson was still a viable threat. You still said that Clemson-FSU game is one to circle, is one to watch. So at least you still had, okay, Clemson at the time might not have been a national title contender, but they were right on the edge. there's nobody even close to that edge right now. I mean, Boston College and Syracuse are probably the two best teams in the ACC.
Yep, and the ACC's problem has been sustainability outside of Clemson.
Obviously.
You think about Duke and their run. Okay, it wasn't sustainable. Virginia Tech was great under Frank Beamer. It's not been able to be consistent under Justin Fuente. I mean, we think Syracuse is on the precipice of doing that. We don't know. Florida State is fighting to get its way back. As we talked about before, it's like the conference just can't have more than one team on a roll at the same time.
And it feels like also, kind of following up on your point, it reminds me of like mid-'90s Florida State, where Clemson right now, their brand is bigger than the conference.
Yes.
And, the ACC, most people will say the ACC is one of the weaker Power Fives. Folks will poke fun of the Coastal. They'll make fun of how weak that schedule is. But let's just say, for argument's sake, Clemson wants to slip up and they lose an ACC game. There will be no debate that they do not deserve to make the playoff. Mm. They will be in the playoff.
Especially when you got A&M that early. I mean, the margin for error for them could be very slim if they can't get away from the Aggies.
They get the benefit of the doubt for a slip-up, and it's because of Clemson, not because of the conference.
Yes.
They've outgrown the conference brand at the moment.
That's a good point.
And timing is everything. And this conference is starting their own network. And let's face it, football drives the revenue for these networks. And yes, you've got a super team you can market. They may be on that network at the most twice, because they're going to be on ESPN, ESPN2. I mean, they're going to have a national ABC. And then again, we have the other mediocre teams going for scraps. I just think it's awful timing to start your network when right now football really has one marketable team and the rest are just kind of there.
Well, it's no surprise then the ACC network is having Clemson's first game on its air.
Exactly, against Georgia Tech, who's in probably the largest market in the ACC, just behind New York and Boston.
They'll put that Florida State game on. That's an ABC game, right? That they haven't announced it yet, but that feels like
an ABC
just
game.
Because it's Florida State and the brand, but. You wonder how much they'll be aggressive with that and push stuff to that network's air to make people have to have it.
Well, I imagine they're going to maximize as much as they can with Clemson football. They're doing a documentary on their practice up until the Georgia Tech game. So they're going to market that pause as much as they can on the football-wise before men's basketball starts.
And they will have weekly interviews. I'm sure Dabo will be on that. I would say every week, at least starting off. He will be live on the ACC network doing an interview.
It'll be like the Longhorn Network.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I would guarantee you the first month of September, the ACC network will have a heavy tint of orange on it. And, the thing about the ACC network that their mission statement needs to be to make stars. And the way that they can do that, the SEC network has done a really good job with their programs. Yeah, they focus on Alabama. They focus on Texas, A&M, and LSU and Auburn, Georgia. But they also focus on Kentucky and South Carolina and Vanderbilt. And if you watch the SEC network, you feel like you're kind of in on the inside joke, if you will. Like, these stars are coming. You knew who Benny Snell was 2 years ago. So last year when the entire nation is going nuts about Benny Snell, you're like, yeah, I remember watching this guy a couple years ago running roughshod on Mississippi State. And they did a really good job of taking not guys that you may not know, but guys that you may have heard of and elevating their status and really putting a spotlight on them. And that's what they have to do. They have to bring up the players in the Coastal Division that are really good players that, maybe ESPN's not going to highlight. You're not going to see on, college football final or on highlight shows the next day. That's what I think their mission statement needs to be.
I think A.J. Dillon's going to be the ACC network's biggest star.
He should be their poster child.
Think about week 1. They've got Virginia Tech at BC. They don't have him in week 2, but then week 3 they've got Kansas at Boston College. So I think you're going to have A.J. Dillon. That's going to be his – because he's – we know A.J. Dillon. We know this guy's obviously – this is a 2,000-yard kind of back.
Potentially, yeah.
But – from a national perspective, he's not nearly what he is within ACC circles. So this could be the perfect.
He's Andre Williams 2.0.
Yeah,
right. And the way
that
I think I love that point. I think you're 100% right. And I think the way that you can push that as the ACC is this is the guy NFL scouts are watching.
Yep.
Like you should watch this guy because your favorite NFL team is absolutely watching this guy.
Well, if I want to go to a ACC game, I can make a phone call. Now, if Corey and Anthony want to go, well, they've got to go to the World Wide Web. And Anthony, do you know where you're going to go on the World Wide Web?
I'm going to go to cgiant.com, John.
That's right, cgiant.com. Type in these letters at checkout, SDH. It helps you, and it helps us. All right, when we come back, we're going to try to tackle the Coastal Division. I hope you have some time.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Rock at the What's Up Falcons podcast, and I'm joined with my boys. My boys in the house. Where you at?
Yeah. What up?
Oh, gee, and we have Q, and we have Hoop in the house.
Q's here, the most beloved guy in all of sports entertainment.
Indeed. Hey, y'all, we want to thank everyone for listening to us, and if you want to listen to some great Falcons information, check us out on the What's Up Falcons podcast. Right, fellas?
Right. Sir. Hey, we here every week, baby.
We keeping it real, so check us out. I'm there on Twitter. Holla. Peace.
Subscribe to the What's Up Falcons podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Listen to the What's Up Falcons podcast at whatsupfalcons.com.
College football fans, check out the College Football Debrief. Here's a sample of what you get. And joining us is Don Munson, the voice of the Clemson Tigers. You have had a front row seat to witness what Trevor Lawrence has accomplished as a true freshman. What amazes you about Trevor?
First and foremost, the most impressive thing about Trevor is the way that every time he has stepped on a football field this season, he took a step forward. There was never any regression from Trevor Lawrence. And that, to me, is amazing for a kid that young to come right out of high school and do what he's doing and lead a team to a national championship. And then the other is just the way that he handles himself. He's so calm, he is so cool, he is so collected that he just gets things taken care of. And it's not a show. What you see is exactly what Trevor Lawrence is.
You can catch the College Football Debrief on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Check out the College Football Debrief on the OSG Podcasting Network. Welcome back. It's time to talk ACC Coastal Division. Anthony Goldman, Corey McCartney, John Wilkerson here with you. Okay, we've had 6 different Coastal Division champions, and there's 7 in the Coastal Division, 7 schools. Oh, by the way, Virginia is the school that hasn't won it, and they're the favorite to win the Coastal. Do you guys concur?
Yes. I like Virginia. Manny Diaz, what he's building at Miami is going to be fun later, but it's not time. I think Bryce Perkins that's the best QB in the conference not named Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
And you think about the rushing yards, 900-plus rushing yards out of him last year. I just think with the way that they operate, the way that Bronco plays things close to the vest, I think he's a perfect fit for them. I think the schedule lines up. I really like Virginia.
I think that Virginia, I agree with you. They have the marquee name at quarterback in Bryce Perkins. They are probably the most known out of all these teams in the Coastal. I do think that some of these other teams have a higher ceiling to have more talent. Could be better at the end of the year. But right now, what we know about these teams, Virginia definitely checks most of the boxes. We know how they're going to play. Mm-hmm. They're going to be really solid on offense. They're going to have good ball control, not going to force a lot of things, going to take what the defenses give them. They're going to play solid defense, and they're going to be physical, and they're going to be well coached. So you know that aspect coming in. I'm a little leery. We'll get to who I actually think will end up winning the Coastal. But again, you could throw a dart at a dartboard and hit the winner of the Coastal. There's no way.
Or spin a wheel?
Yeah, you can't confidently pick who's going to win this division right now. But as of right now, they are absolutely on the most solid footing.
When you look at their schedule, though, this is a 10-win team. Yeah. It's very easy to see them going into that Notre Dame game, 5 weeks in undefeated. And then after that, if they get through that, unless they get picked off by somebody that's not supposed to beat them, maybe Miami, but it's, I think they go into Virginia Tech searching for an 11-win season.
And there's the other conundrum for Virginia because it's been 15 years, well, I guess 16 years now, since Virginia has defeated Virginia Tech. Matt Schaub was the quarterback of UVA when last time they beat Virginia Tech. And they had that game last year, and they let it get away. And it was a pretty devastating loss for Virginia last year in Blacksburg. You just think all the planets are aligned now, again, for a 10-win season for Virginia and to get that win over Virginia Tech, that Scott Stadium, the goalpost won't last.
If it doesn't happen this year, though.
Oh, if it doesn't happen this year,
Yeah.
I mean, they do have their number.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech will have their number. It'll be official.
It's definitely already in their mind because you could tell watching that game last year when they, were dominating the game for the most part.
Right.
And when it went to overtime, you could just feel it. You could feel it at home watching it going, what are they going to do to lose this?
And it was a fumble. And yeah, this the way they lost it. It was pretty devastating. You brought up Miami, Corey, and the Manny Diaz. The Manny Diaz era begins. It was a fun December for Manny Diaz, going from Miami to Philly and back to Miami. He told me it kind of felt like he was coming back from a long vacation when he got back in the facility as the head coach. There's talent there. I think you and I, Anthony, we discussed when all this was going down that the best move Manny Diaz made was getting rid of the entire offensive staff and starting from scratch. And he got a great offensive coordinator in Dan Enos.
Yeah, he had to hit the reset button on that offense because the only reason that fans in Miami were excited about Manny Diaz is because the defense was what was getting all the headlines and was carrying the team, really. The offense has done nothing. So bringing in a guy like Dan Enos, who isn't going to be the most flashiest guy, but is a very good fundamentals coach, and I'm sure we'll talk about how he develops quarterbacks. I mean, he might be the best quarterback developer in the country right now. So that was a good pull for Miami. I mean, looking at this Miami team, people forget how highly rated they were going in last year. Last year, before that LSU game, I mean, we're looking at a top 15 team right on the edge of a top 10 team in preseason. They get, smacked around against LSU, and then the wheels just kind of fell off. And even when they were winning games, nobody really paid attention, waited till they got to the back half of their schedule, and they lost at Virginia, and then it all just kind of went downhill from there. So getting this team's toughness back, I think, is key, but there is talent there. I will say, when you look at this Miami team, defense, again, is going to have to be where they live and die.
Oh, look at those linebackers.
Their linebacking core is better than Clemson's. I fully believe that.
I mean,
when you look at this linebacking core of Pickney and Quarterman, I know Clemson is stacked with studs, but those two would start on any team in the country, including Clemson. So they got good building blocks. They're good up front. They have a good defensive front. It's the offense is going to be the question with Miami.
104th in total offense last year, and you mentioned the change there at OC, and certainly, Tate Martell. That's the big get for them. So many. You're that bad on offense, but nobody left.
Right.
And then you bring in a guy in Martell that has had big time experience. If he wins out, and N'Kosi Perry and who's the other Williams. They're going to end up being in a good spot. Jaron Williams, a redshirt freshman. They could be in a good spot offensively, but you're right. I mean, the defense is potentially so good, especially at linebacker. Even if they're middle of the road offensively,
right,
and they have that defense, they could be in a really good position.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, they don't have to be a top 25 offense if they can. So last year, they had, I think, the second to worst average of third down distance in the country. They were almost 3rd and 9. It was like 3rd and 8.7 yards on third down. So you cannot be in 3rd and long every time. And their offensive line is not going to be much better. They're not going to get a lot of quarterback protection. Tate Martell did not look great this spring. He really struggled.
Yeah, he did struggle.
I honestly think, and coaches are never going to come out and just say, hey, this guy that transferred in is my starting quarterback. But I think that behind the scenes, it would have been known he was the guy if he was at least average to pretty positive. But he had a bad spring. So because of that, it does open it up for N'Kosi Perry. And, Tate Martell has a higher ceiling. I know with you, with your Ohio State ties, I know you know a little bit of the background better on Tate Martell. Highly recruited guy, very talented. But N'Kosi Perry being in this system,
yeah, it's huge.
He almost looks more like a Dan Enos guy to me. Dan Enos is going to coach a guy to find his spots and almost use them the way he used the quarterbacks at Arkansas. And just
turn the Allen brothers into an NFL combine.
Exactly. Pick your spots. Don't force the ball. Low risk. Medium reward kind of player. Mm-hmm. I almost think that could be what we see if Tate Martell doesn't step up and win this job.
And I think a lot of people saw Martell to Haskins as that change of pace guy that was more of a. But completed 82% of his passes last year. So this is a guy who can be accurate. I mean, certainly a lot of what he did, it came against Tulane and Rutgers. But at the same time, I mean, this is a guy who, was playing behind a Heisman Trophy finalist last year. So I do think you're right, though. To me, if he was the man, you would have known it. Yeah. You would have known it right away. And I think N'Kosi Perry, I think there were people last year, John, remember, that were wondering at the beginning of the season how much he was going to see playing time, talking about Perry.
Right.
And it didn't really materialize as much. But
you saw a lot of action last year. I just thought N'Kosi Perry was always Mark Richt's guy.
Yes.
And he was going to get him in as much as he could to get experience. But it was really not necessarily devastating for him last year, but he just didn't have anything go for him. I wonder where his confidence was heading into spring ball. Got a new coaching staff coming in, new offensive coordinator. Was the pressure of not being the chosen one off of him then, and now he can be himself?
Right.
And is the confidence level there? I think his confidence was probably way down at the end of the year. I mean, he just really didn't have a good year last year.
Well, that whole offense.
And I think he just got forced in.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what Dan Enos can do with N'Kosi Perry and what kind of opportunities he's going to get this year, because I tend to feel that Tate Martell is going to win that job if he has any kind of good – if he looks good in fall camp.
They want him to win it. I mean, the fan base, as Corey said, this guy he's talented, and everybody knows it, and he's a flashy name, The fans want Martell to win it, and they're going to give him every opportunity to win it. And I think he probably will. At least that first game against Florida, I think Tate Martell will be your starter. We'll see if he can hold on to it, if he can keep his confidence up. But quarterback is probably their biggest concern on offense. They have a pretty good stable of running backs. I mean, I like the running backs that they have back there. DJ Dallas is a big play guy. Not going to get a lot of carries, but he can get a carry and take it 70 yards. I really like Lorenzo Lingard. I want to see him get more opportunities. And it was a big coup to keep Jeff Thomas. I know Jeff Thomas was in and out of the transfer portal a couple of times this offseason. He's decided to stay, and that's a big get for them to keep a guy like Jeff Thomas for this wide receiving core. Looking at Miami, to me, Corey, and I know you mentioned, Virginia, you really like them. I think the thing about Virginia that stands out is their schedule, like you said, and they pull Louisville and Florida State from the Atlantic, which is the same pool that Miami gets. So to me, this division is going to come down to who does better against the Atlantic. Can both teams go 2-0 against the Atlantic? Because if one of those teams slip up in one of their cross-divisional games, that could be the difference.
You're right. Miami's schedule, because you start out with Florida, is so interesting to me. You could go – they take on Virginia October 11th. I don't think it's crazy to think they could have 3 losses at that point.
Oh, yeah.
They could drop Florida. They could drop – who knows what UNC is going to look like.
Right.
But you got Virginia Tech and Virginia back-to-back weeks. To me, Virginia is the one that's just they got a lot of help in terms of the schedule, and they don't have to open up with nearly as tough as an opponent as Miami does. And what is that game if they don't look good against Florida? What is that going to do?
Well, I mean, it's going to sully some of the it's going to sully kind of what their reputation is this year, in my opinion, and it's also going to. Can Manny Diaz prepare his guys for game time?
And you don't get a Central. They face Central Bethune-Cookman in Central Michigan after UNC.
Yeah,
so if you can't get them to bounce back in a hurry, you could be right. You're fighting from behind after week 2 if you can't bounce back and take down the Tar Heels.
I know we love those big kickoff games across conference versus conference. That North Carolina game to me is the big one. I mean, the good thing for Miami, they don't have the hype behind them they did going into that LSU game last year. I mean, this feels like your typical SEC-ACC matchup where everyone's just riding the ACC team off, and there's pretty low expectations. So if they don't come out and shock the world and get a big win, if they're just mildly competitive, I think it'll be okay. I really do. I think the North Carolina one is the game that you really got to worry about, because you're right, Corey. If they lose in Chapel Hill, their second game, I know it's technically they have an off game in between the two, but it's week 2 of the season. If they lose that game, 0-2 to start the year, then now you're talking about can Manny Diaz keep his team involved.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned North Carolina. Let's bring up the Tar Heels because Mac Brown is coming back for his second go-around as head coach, something I think all of us were kind of surprised about. Probably this year is going to be a bit of a struggle for Mac Brown and the Tar Heels, but he's starting to build something there that he was building his first time around.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement around that program, and I was pretty critical when they hired him. I didn't know if that was the right decision for them to make. I really wanted to see them hire Scott Satterfield, a guy who had cut his teeth in that state, but it has worked for them really well so far off the field. Their coaching staff has done a phenomenal job of getting excitement around that program. They're recruiting lights out.
Yep.
I mean, it's so funny.
And
because,
in-state.
Yeah, and in-state, which we've talked about for years, has always been a key in that state. Can anyone just win half the battles for the top in-state kids? They're doing a really great job of that. And what I like about them is their class last year, recruiting-wise, was good. This year's class is a little bit better. And even when they lose a kid, like they lost a 4-star quarterback 3 weeks ago, they gained a 4-star quarterback a week ago. So they're able, when they get that big recruit, so many of these ACC schools, they'll land a 4-star. They'll land a kid that, the bigger schools wanted, and they'll get him for one reason or the other. But if those kids end up bailing, their backup plan is usually someone who's not quite up to par athletically, and they are matching, defects with equal talent, which is hard to do at a school like North Carolina. So off the field, it's been great. On the field, we'll see.
It appears they're going to go with a freshman, Sam Howell, as their quarterback. Now, that was a recruiting coup for them to get Sam Howell. And he's going to go through a lot of growing pains this year, but you got to like his upside.
And he's got a lot of running backs behind him.
Yes, he does.
That's going to be helpful. Jordan Brown from K-State. They got Michael Carter, Antonio Williams. I mean, they've got guys. They've got depth at running back, which is going to be huge for developing that young QB. And, you know what Longo did with wide receivers at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. You got to feel like the seeds are there. They're certainly there, but is it going to happen day one from this team with a true freshman at starting quarterback? This is going to be, again, if they could be a very sneaky early team while people are still trying to get a look at them, I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, I think you bringing up the wide receiver coach is a great example. That's a good point to bring because they have pretty good length at wide receiver. They have some guys that are 6'2", 6'3", so they've got some bigger guys that can play on the edge, which is going to help that young quarterback if he can just throw the ball up and let him get it some. Sam Howell is the reason to watch this team early on because of all the excitement around him and the recruiting battle with FSU and UNC on where is he going to go, who's he committed to, all the drama leading up to his signing was probably one of the best storylines in ACC recruiting last year, I thought. Mac Brown, the day he announces as he's the new head coach at North Carolina, he immediately leaves his press conference to go see Sam Howell. He camped out at his house. This was their crown jewel that they were looking to add to this class, and naturally they're going to give him the reins and let him go. There's going to be a lot of growing pains with this offense, like you say, Corey, but you look at this receiving core, there are a lot of sophomores and juniors. Mm-hmm. We're going to get to see these guys again next year, and I think they're going to grow this season, which may not result in a lot of wins, but I think this is going to pay a lot towards next year for this passing game.
I want to see how they get through September because the opening is South Carolina and Charlotte, then Miami and Chapel Hill, go to Wake Forest, that's not easy, host Appalachian State, and Clemson. They host Clemson in Chapel Hill on September 28th. That's the tough September.
What's the over-under on wins for them out of that stretch? Is it 2?
2 probably.
Yeah.
I'm taking the under.
Yeah.
I'm taking the
under.
under.
I'd agree with you.
Honestly,
probably,
this might be sacrilege.
It might be an offer.
I think that they could. I think they're probably winless going to Georgia Tech. I really do. They get Appalachian State off a bye. And I know Appalachian State has a new staff. I know they're going through a transition as well, but there's still talent on that team. They have a very good secondary. Their secondary is better than North Carolina's. And I think that game could be one of those games that Appalachian State is looked at as an upset. But, really, I don't know if that is that big of an upset.
If they went into October 26th versus Duke winless, what is that? What is the vibe around Chapel Hill, if they are winless at that point, that's a very real possibility.
Is that the same date with Late Night with Roy? Because that might be the big attraction in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, no kidding. You're right. They did themselves no favors with the schedule.
No.
I mean, the only gimme win they have non-conference wise is Mercer.
Yeah, and that's a long
next
way.
to last game.
That's a long way.
And that's before the NC State game.
Right.
Yeah.
So
It's one of the most petty rivalries I've ever been involved with.
I mean, when you got South Carolina, you're not winning that game,
Nope.
and then you got App State. I mean, yeah, people are going to pick them to win that game, but that's I don't know.
Those
I
are
mean,
people
right
who-
now.
Surprised.
Those
Yeah.
are people don't know App State.
Right now. I mean, I think that's a pick 'em at best.
And who knows what Georgia Tech with Collins? I mean, it
That's
could be
true.
like that offense could be so different at that point. This is not a good schedule for them getting through the end to the end of October.
Well, you brought up the Yellow Jackets. Let's talk about the Yellow Jackets because I can't think of a program that's gone through a sea change the way Georgia Tech is going to go through. Going from the triple option look of Paul Johnson to Jeff Collins with his offensive look, which is a totally different look, and where a tight end will actually catch a pass instead of blocking all the time. And the receivers, if you're a receiver from Georgia Tech, you're just salivating that you're going to get a chance to catch the ball. Jalen Camp is an example. He's probably their top receiver. He had one catch last year. One catch.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Now, it was I think 40-plus yards, but that was the only catch he had all year. So, with that said, it's going to be a tough year for the Yellow Jackets this year because of the adjustment.
They got UConn transfer Tyler Davis, too.
Right.
That's going to help out the passing game. Malachi Carter, 6'3", 185. I mean, they got a guy that you think about being in the red zone, getting those jump balls.
Flying past people.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously not worried about depth at running back. I mean,
No.
Jordan Mason's going to be just fine. Jerry Howard's back. I like Lucas Johnson, a big guy, 6'3", 215. Can move around. I think that's going to be a nice fit for them. But this will be a work in progress, and I think you can get teams early on because of that. But it's going to be a process. Jeff Collins has said, and we talked about this. He's said all the right things. He's done everything to
Well, he's a native son.
absorb Atlanta, to be Atlanta, to say we want to be Atlanta's team, to be hip, to be cool, to be all things Atlanta. Wearing the 404 hats. He's doing all that stuff.
Eating at Waffle House.
Now, eating at Waffle House. This is the kind of offense they need to capture the kids in Metro Atlanta.
Right.
I'm going to be really interested to see how this plays itself out.
I agree with you. And, they're similar to North Carolina, but a lot bigger picture than North Carolina in the fact that they've won the offseason, like you said. And they are recruiting very well. I mean, this class that they have coming up towards December for Georgia Tech standards is the best class that they've had in at least a decade.
Well,
at least a decade.
Well, and that goes back to Jeff Collins because he was a recruiting coordinator for Chan Gailey in 2007. And a lot of those players that won the vacated ACC title when Paul Johnson was head coach, his first title there, well, those were players that Jeff Collins brought in, or at least the majority of them.
Yeah.
And so, he's got the experience of knowing how to get guys to come to Atlanta. And you're right, Corey. He's selling the city. He's selling the brand as hard as he can. Jeff Collins is a native son. He's from Conyers. He went to Rockdale County High School. This is his dream job. He wants to market that GT logo as strong as he can. Although this year they probably won't come close to matching their to getting 5 wins or even 4 wins. I think the excitement level at Bobby Dodd Stadium will be probably much higher than any of Paul Johnson's years.
Yeah, I think people are thriving for a change, and they're going to welcome a change even despite of losing more games this year. It would help him a lot if they could play a little bit of defense, which doesn't look like they're going to be able to. They only have 4 starters back.
Right.
And, this defense has never really been that gangbuster defense you wanted to begin with under Paul Johnson, which always surprised me. I always thought that his system kind of beckoned for a more physical defense.
Yeah.
He just never got it, whether it was coordinators or whoever you want to put the blame on. But they're going to have a lot of young guys out there out of position and getting beat, and they play a lot of teams that play fast and that they're going to spread them out. The Clemson game, the coronation of the ACC network where they have to go to Clemson is probably going to be a massacre. I mean, they could be competitive for a little bit, but I mean, let's be honest. They're, if Clemson wants to score 60, they can. But the following week they play USF at home, and
that's not easy.
USF is probably going to score 40 points,
and they won the game last year.
Right? Is this Georgia Tech offense capable of scoring 40 right now? Probably not. So it's going to be a struggle, and I think Jeff Collins is the right guy long term, and I think that fans will put up with a 2 or 3 win season if he continues to keep winning off the field and recruiting and selling the brand. But that's going to be where his wins are done because he's not winning much on the field.
Well, you better win against the Citadel, Temple, and win that UNC battle because maybe you get Duke on the road, but those 3 games, that might be it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, then the way they close the season with 3 straight home games, but it's Virginia Tech, NC State,
well, even from
Georgia.
The Miami game on. I mean, Miami, Pitt, Virginia Tech, NC State, Georgia. That's
tough.
Yeah, the good vibes will be
tough
tested. Close.
Speaking of the Hokies, let's talk about Virginia Tech. To me, this is a team that is primed for decline. And, I really don't understand why it's not really working for Justin Fuente, especially at the quarterback position. This is the guy that was known as the quarterback whisperer. You had Josh Jackson obviously suffered the injury in the Old Dominion game that kind of set them back. Ryan Willis did a good job. It got him into a bowl game, but there's something there that just doesn't feel right. And I just think if all teams are up for a decline, this is a team that's up for a decline.
Josh Jackson, Sean Savoy are in Maryland. Eric Kuma's Old Dominion now.
Yeah, they've transferred out. And who was the quarterback before Josh Jackson? Jared Evans.
Yeah.
I mean, he left after a year. Yeah, he decided to go in the NFL draft. That was, question if you want. But, again, a guy, Justin Fuente, has a reputation of developing quarterbacks, can't keep them at Virginia Tech, which I find really odd.
Yeah, it has been a weird transition, especially after the season that they had in 2016 and 2017. Back-to-back 9-win season, 10-win season, 9-win season. They had success going right away, and people were ready to say, okay, Justin Fuente is going to step right in, and he's going to have this program back to competing for coastal titles on a consistent basis. And then you get the 6-7 season last year. And 6-7, when you look at the rest of this division, was not awful. It was pretty on par with every other team in this division. But considering what the expectation was, that was a big disappointment for Virginia Tech. And some of the games that they lost last year, it was like this was such a Jekyll and Hyde team. And one guy who everyone loves, I feel bad for even saying negative things about him, but Bud Foster had some shine knocked off of him last year.
Yes.
And he's been a guy that, has such a good reputation that even years when their defense has had a dip or had a down season, they've always given him the benefit of the doubt. I don't feel like that's being given to him this year because of the way the defense played last year. And not just young guys, because they did play a lot of young guys, especially in the linebacking core.
Well,
but they
had to.
But they also just looked undisciplined and played out of position. There was a lot of schematic problems that this defense had where 3 guys in the secondary is playing zone and 1 dude's playing man, and that guy gets beat. That happened a lot, and that's not something you're used to seeing with Bud Foster.
No, and I'm not trying to put anybody on a hot seat of any sort, but you think about Fuente, and I go back to Josh Jackson leaving, and he said that he felt disrespected because after starting as a redshirt freshman and then the next year breaking his leg, he was told he had to come back and compete for the job all over again, and he felt disrespected, so he's out. It was a 48-hour period in which Jackson, Kuma, Chris Cunningham, and Deshaun McLeese all announced plans to transfer. 48 hours. There's
just something odd going on there.
There's something weirdly systematic going on in there. That doesn't just happen.
No.
It doesn't just happen, especially for a team that's 2 years removed from playing for an ACC title.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to paint a bad picture of what Fuente's got there, but clearly that doesn't just happen at a major program.
No, not at all. And I think, the defense should be better. They have 10 starters back. And they have talent on defense. Now, they don't have depth, but they have talent. So they should be better on defense, but it's all about offense. Like you say, Corey, That's Justin Fuente's baby. That's what he's known for, his offense. And he, right or wrong, is going to be the fall guy for how that offense fares. And, I think their quarterback situation is okay. It needs more development. They need to get some better plays from the quarterback, but they also need to get some bigger plays from wide receivers. They were not explosive at all last year. They did not have many explosive plays. The running backs just never really got in a rhythm. They rotated them, I thought, kind of oddly at times last year. Even though, we mentioned the Virginia game earlier. In the Virginia game, they found some success running the ball late in the second quarter. And then they start rotating running backs. And in the fourth quarter, they're like, oh, yeah, hey, remember that guy? He was running the ball really well like 2 hours ago. Put him back out there, and they come back and tie the game. So they need to have better personnel decisions. Yeah. And I think that absolutely falls on Fuente. But the defense should be good enough that if they improve on offense, they should be there. I mean, this is a team that should be competing for the Coastal. It's going to come down to coaching.
Yes.
I got a feeling the bowl streak ends this year.
You think you're calling that now?
I'm calling that.
I mean,
it should have ended last year.
But Old Dominion, Furman, Rhode Island. You're halfway there.
Right. Good point.
I mean, a really weak non-conference.
The one thing I don't like about their schedule is this September through mid-September, mid-October, when they play their coastal opponents that they're probably going to be competing with. They have Duke at Miami. They got Rhode Island in there, but then they play North Carolina. All three of those coastal teams are coming off a bye before them.
Yeah.
So
and then you go to Notre Dame.
Yeah, and then you go to Notre Dame, which isn't a conference game, but can get you beat up going down the stretch. So I think when they catch teams and them all coming off a bye could be a downplay for them. But it's all going to be about coaching. It's all about coaching with them. I think they're a bowl team. I don't think that they're going to win the Coastal, but I think that they're good enough to get to 6 or 7 wins. But is that where Virginia Tech is now? Are they a 6 or 7 win team? They should be better.
Having North Carolina and Georgia Tech teams we know are going to be in transitional periods. I mean, that's 5 right there. So you only got to get one more.
I still say the bowl streak ends.
Imagine what if they have 5 wins going into that Virginia game and they beat Virginia to get the 6th win. And
again, that's when we know they've got their number.
Yep.
You know, Pittsburgh won the Coastal last year with 7 wins, and we're just now getting to them. Pat Narduzzi's been there now 5 years, or 6 years, around there.
Yeah, this will be his 6th season.
His 6th season coming in, and you thought they'd be kind of further along right now than they are. You know, he got some equity winning the Coastal last year, making an appearance in the championship game. But you kind of figure that this program should be further along than they are.
Yeah, and you figure that the defense should be the calling card of this program by now. I mean,
especially with a fan base that really appreciates tough physical play.
Well, and we're located in a region where you can find a lot of, defensive linemen and linebackers. And I mean, that is a region where you can find a lot of defensive talent. So the fact that you have a defensive-minded coach who hangs his hat on that, who's at a program that their success has been based off the offense, is kind of weird. But, winning the Coastal is hard to – you can't really criticize them too much because they did win the division. But like you say, they won it at 7-5. And what I thought was so odd is they're the only division champion from last year that averaged less points per game on offense than they gave up on defense.
Wow.
Which is really weird. I don't know how you do that.
And win a division.
Yeah. They averaged 25 points a game offensively and gave up 27 points a game. I mean, that's
only
that's
in the
strange.
Coastal.
Does
that happen?
That's a good point. Only in the Coastal. Kenny Pickett's back this year, and, Kenny Pickett is exciting sometimes in negative ways, but he does things that get you interested, whether it's a touchdown or a pick. So, he can make plays.
They need him to be better, though, because Quadri Olison, Darren Hall are gone. I mean, it's just going to be running back by committee. I really like Maurice French, their wide receiver.
I do, too.
He's explosive.
Yeah.
25 catches last year for 557 and a score. He's a playmaker.
Yeah.
This guy's I think he's going to be even better this year, but can they do enough behind Pickett running the ball to allow him to? Because he was erratic last year.
Right.
As you mentioned with the picks. So I think we need to see a much better improved version of him. Or do they end up going with, redshirt freshman Nick Patty, true freshman Davis Bevell, Beville, B-E-V-I-L-L-E. How do you think you say that one?
It's Bevel.
Bevel,
I think it's Bevel.
We got 3 different versions. But I mean,
you covered all your bases.
that's right. Does Pickett show enough in camp to hold them off?
Yeah,
because he was erratic last year. But they need that offense to be much, much better.
Well, they have a new OC in Mark Whipple, so we'll see if that pays any dividends at all.
Yeah, and I know that Matt Canada is such a controversial figure in college football right now, but as good as their running game has been, they were at their best when they were physically running the ball out of shotgun with those sweeps and getting the ball to the outside and using, not Quadri Olson, but who was the other Quadri that they had at wide receiver a couple years ago?
Yeah, I know you're talking about. I can't think of his name either.
Was it Henderson? But
yeah, he was the wide out.
Okay. But using the spread to physically run was what really made them successful. And Narduzzi's success has been built on offense and built on running the ball. And I don't think their offensive line this year is good enough to just line up and knock people back. They got to get creative in running the ball. And if they don't do that, they're going to struggle. And they may even struggle to make a bowl. They're a 5-win to 7-win team. 7 wins could win them the Coastal, John. We saw it last year, but this team doesn't seem to be taking a step. They're kind of right where they were last year.
Yeah, not dipping, but not.
They're going to know where they're going to know where they stand right away. You get Virginia week 1.
Yeah.
They will know where they stand right away.
Well, and I'll tell you, don't sleep on Ohio either. Ohio is one of the better teams.
Yeah, I mean, they could start out 0-4.
Yeah.
They could go into Delaware searching for a defending division champ could go into week 5 searching for their first win.
100%. And at best, they're probably 1-3.
Yeah. How about Duke, boys? The Blue Devils.
Still playing football.
They're still playing football.
Yes, they are. They have a new quarterback.
They have a new quarterback in Quentin Harris, who replaces Daniel Jones, who's now with the New York Giants. I know David Cutcliffe in his 12 years there has been trying to improve the depth of the program, and for the most part he's been able to do that. But this year he suffered way too many losses, especially offensively, for them to be no more than a 5-win team.
They have 4 guys back on offense. And think about last year, they scored 14 points or fewer in 4 of the last 9 games and lost them all.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a tough road, for the QB whisperer to get things back on track there. Quentin Harris can run. I think he'll be fine. But I don't think this team is going to be explosive by any means.
No, and they're going to have to live and die off Deion Jackson, especially in conference play.
Yes.
I mean, he is their returning leading rusher, and he's shown flashes last year of being more than just a guy that runs 4 or 5 yards and falls. He has some explosive ability. He can break a play. They're going to need him to help carry them, especially early in the year, because like you say, Corey, they're young in a lot of spots. And when Duke has been young in the past, I mean, at this point, I just always pencil them in to make a bowl. I know they missed a bowl a couple of years ago, but for the most part, this is always pretty much a 6-win team, and that's what my expectation is for them. But they've gotten there in the past by just being smart, not turning the football over, and waiting on their opponents to make mistakes and playing pretty solid defense. Not great defense, but solid defense where they're really coached well. They're going to have to rely on that defense and that running game early on in the season, and their season really starts September 7th against North Carolina A&T. You might as well just not even count week 1 because they play Alabama, and you're not going to get anything to really grow off of from that game, I don't think.
Well, the NC A&T game is the only home game they have in September because they're playing Alabama right down the road from us at Mercedes-Benz.
Right.
And then you go to Middle Tennessee State after that NC A&T game, and then you go to Virginia Tech. I mean, that could be a 1-3 start. And with a young team that is trying to build confidence, and against Alabama, their confidence is going to just go all the way down
just
to the floor.
Don't get injured. Do a couple things. Don't get injured. Let's get out of there. I mean, that has to be the game plan.
Oh, without question. And you worry. This is one of those cases where that Notre Dame game is costly. Because you don't get that other game against a non-conference opponent where you feel like you can get that guaranteed win. If you can't beat Middle Tennessee, where are the wins coming from for this team?
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. Now they are the kind of team, and this is the kind of division that it's never going to be as cut and dry as we're laying it out to be. I mean,
yeah.
They're going to end up beating 2 or 3 teams in conference that we're like, yeah, they're not going to beat them, and they'll end up beating them, and probably convincingly. So could they go to Blacksburg and win? They absolutely could go to Blacksburg and win. Sure, right. They could.
They could beat Georgia Tech on October 12th.
They should beat Georgia Tech. They're going to be favored, and it's at home. I mean, they theoretically, I don't know if they should beat Pittsburgh, but that's a field goal type game. Maybe home field advantage gives them the edge, but they're going to find some wins. I still think you never can count out David Cutcliffe to find a way to get this team bowl eligible. And he does such a great job of just finding ways to get them bowl eligible. And this is not his least talented team that he's had. I mean, this team is in a better shape than some other teams he's had that have won 6 or 7 games. But they're young, and they're going to have to grow, and this early part of the schedule does them no favors. They're probably going to start really rough. The question is, by mid-October, can they grow into themselves? And when they start that stretch of at UNC, let's ignore the Notre Dame game, just don't get hurt, Syracuse, Wake, Miami, can they pull it together for those Final 4 conference games? And if they can, they probably can find 6 wins somewhere.
And I look at that Wake Forest game, next to the last game of the season, because they always play the Deacs tough, and they always seem to win at Winston-Salem.
Yeah.
So that would be the key game to me for Duke.
If you look at their schedule after Virginia Tech, they only leave the state of North Carolina once the rest of the season. Isn't that wild?
It is wild.
But I still feel like 6 wins is the ceiling.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, this might be a 5-win team, but 6 is definitely the ceiling.
Well, we told you. I hope you have time to listen to the Coastal, because there's a lot of possibilities there. And we did. We took our dear sweet time. Now to the Atlantic Division next. Don't think this one's going to take as long as we anticipate, as the college football debrief continues after this timeout.
The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. All you got to do, install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, lacrosse. Let's get this done. Get the OSG Sports app today.
College football fans, check out the College Football Debrief. Here's a sample of what you get.
You start looking at the daggum schedules of who all these teams have played. Alabama's resume is not very impressive. Now, they beat the crap out of people. There's no doubt about that. But, who have they played? So it makes you wonder, all right, Georgia, push them. What are they going to do? When you push the bully in your neighborhood, what are they going to do to come back to you?
I think I caught you in a fired up mood this time.
You do. You got me, man. I'm ready. I'm ready for Saturday at 4 o'clock. Let's go.
You can catch the College Football Debrief on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Check out the College Football Debrief on the OSG Podcasting Network. Time to talk Atlantic Division on our ACC football preview. And what the heck, let's start with Clemson. Any reason why this team shouldn't repeat as the Atlantic champion for the 100th straight year?
I think it's something that Anthony said before we started doing this, and we talked about motivation. The concept of what's harder, is it getting to the top or staying there? Can Dabo Swinney keep this team motivated enough to maintain that pace? Because that second game against Texas A&M is, that's one that could be really interesting, and it could alter the course of Clemson's season, because if they don't get through that one unscathed, the margin for error for them has dropped dramatically. And you've got Syracuse the week after that. We know Florida State has not been good, but that's a team that's traditionally given them trouble. They've played a lot of close games over the years. I think South Carolina is going to be a good team, for them a week before the ACC title game. So there are certainly the opportunity for pitfalls. I think this team has enough talent where it shouldn't matter. But that week 2 against Texas A&M, to me, looms really large if we're talking about the possibilities for this team.
And I think also, and we kind of mentioned this off air earlier as well, Clemson are slow starters. They've always kind of played themselves into, especially years when they've won national championships, they kind of play themselves into the season, and they start at about 65%, and by the time they get to late November, early December, they're clicking on all cylinders, and they're an unbeatable monster. Their hardest part of their season is in September. Texas A&M week 2, followed by at Syracuse week 3. I mean, you got a trip to Boston College coming to Clemson late October. Other than that, I mean, those are their 3 biggest games, and 2 of the 3 are early in September. So they do need to be focused. They can't read the hype, and the headlines. They got to be ready for those games. They're going to be ready for Texas A&M because of what happened last year, and because they're going to be hearing all that talk all offseason about Texas A&M and the excitement. The thing with Clemson, I mean, let's be honest, and I know this is kind of cheating for football fans because we want our teams to take every opponent serious, and every game's the next big game's the most important game, blah, blah, blah. They can sleepwalk through 75% of the schedule and go unscathed. I mean, if they don't show up after October 26th, if they don't show up again until November 30th, they are going to be completely fine. So, and you don't want to preach that, but in some ways it's been beneficial for them because think about it, forget last year. What about the year that they won it with Deshaun Watson? Deshaun Watson did not have great numbers that year, did not run the ball very often. He was not the Deshaun Watson that we had seen the years prior. But they kept him healthy and they kept him in a box. Yeah. And when it got late in the season, they opened up that box and he was early season form by playoff time.
It's that NBA concept, right?
Yes.
Load management. And
load management.
Yeah, you get it set up for when it really matters. And when you have enough talent out there, it's the Alabama formula that we saw for so long, and Dabo's doing it to perfection. You're deep enough at every spot that you don't have to go out and kill it every game.
Don't bring the term load management to college football.
It already has been.
Yeah, it's already here.
And they're using it. Mike Soroka used it. The Braves pitcher used it coming out of the All-Star break. It is permeating sports.
It's banned in the padded room. Load management is banned in the padded room.
You can ignore it, John, but it's arrived. It is here. And I would say Clemson is probably not the godfather of it in college football, but they're definitely the perfectionists of it because
the professor of the load management.
Who has done better at that than Clemson has in the last couple of years during their success? And their schedule affords them to do that.
Yeah, it does.
People are going to try to find holes, and their defense, they have to replace a lot. The defensive front, they lost all those guys. Guess what? They're going to put a whole lot more guys in the first round of the NFL draft coming up soon. I mean, they get Xavier Thomas back. He's a first-round draft pick. They have a lot of young guys behind them just waiting on terms, and they just, they reload. That's what they do. They're going to be fine. They don't play an offense.
And you got Brent Venables as your DC.
Right. Other than Syracuse, there's not an offense that's going to stress them enough in conference that's even going to push their growth at all. So I think we can move on from Clemson. I don't even know what else
I will tell you, one thing I think is interesting with Clemson, obviously, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne. Who leads this team in receiving this season? Is it Justin Ross? Is it T. Higgins? Is it DeAndre Overton?
It's all the above.
I
mean, that's an embarrassment of riches.
Joe Nagata. I mean, it's insane.
It's an embarrassment of riches. And then you got Trevor Lawrence throwing through.
Yeah.
You got an NFL quarterback throwing. NFL caliber quarterback throwing.
Well, what's funny? I'm glad you brought up Joe Nagata because I am so excited to see him play. Mm-hmm. And he's going to play a lot because there's going to be a lot of games that are out of reach. But he could be another guy that was just like Justin Ross that we know about him because we watch him every week, but maybe from a national perspective, he's not a household name, but could play a big role by playoff time because he is so talented. Mm-hmm. And he can rotate right in there and fit right in with those guys. But they are so big. Their length is unmatched. I mean,
it's crazy.
If you're in the right position as a secondary, you're still going to get beat on 50-50 balls most of the time. Just
6'4", 200-pound guys just everywhere.
I mean, it's and run 4.40s. I mean, that blazing speed. I don't know how you defend that.
Who takes over, though, for that guy when you need that catch, that Hunter Renfrow role that they had? Who's that guy that when it comes down to it that they can rely upon to make that catch? I mean, obviously Justin Ross was crazy in the national championship game.
Yeah.
I mean, is that him now or?
It's hard to pick who would be your go-to guy. To me, I mean, and they're great. They're all great. They're all going to play in the NFL. T. Higgins to me is the star in that group because I feel like he kind of sets the tone for this team. I know last year he had a lot of big plays early in games that kind of set up, okay, here we go. The offense is ready. Let's roll and get out of here. he set the tone for that receiving core. And I think finding that slot guy, like you say, when you get in those big games, playoff time, 3rd and medium, 3rd and 4, who can you lock on and make sure he gets to the sticks and catches the ball? I think it could be T. Higgins, but if it's not T. Higgins physically, I think he is the leader in that meeting room.
If there is one question, though, you think about Braden Galloway being suspended for the regular season for PED use, the tight end usage could become interesting because J.C. Chalk only saw a little bit time last season. So I think if there is one weak spot in that offense, it's because of the Galloway suspension. That's minimal.
Right.
We're talking about how great they are at receiver.
No, absolutely. You got to really look with a magnifying glass to find stuff to pick at. And even when you do pick at it, you still can't find more than one loss at best, and you're just expecting them to not show up one day.
So let's talk about the Syracuse Orange because Dino Babers has kind of revived things in Central New York. They had their first 10-win season since 2001 last year. Eric Dungy is no longer at Syracuse. He's moved on. Tommy DeVito is a really good guy that can replace Eric Dungy. The thing about Syracuse, I just don't like the way the season starts because it's 2 road games back-to-back at Liberty, which, is what it is. And then you go to Maryland. And Maryland's got some decent talent.
That'll be a fun game.
That'll be a fun game to watch. And you kind of wonder in that Maryland game, which is a week before Clemson, you got to kind of hope that they're not looking – even in the Liberty game, you got to hope they're not looking past that.
That's going to have
because it's going to ruin all the luster off any kind of matchup with Clemson if they come in 1-1 or even – well, they're going to be 0-2. But, 1-1, it's going to ruin a lot of the hype for that game.
You're going to see a lot of Admiral Akbar Star Wars memes. It's going
to
it's a trap.
Yes.
For that Maryland game. That's going to be everywhere because they're going to be thinking Clemson. They're going to be thinking going 2-0 against Clemson, and that's going to be the gotcha game. That's going to be the one that could derail everything.
Yeah, this team, is really exciting coming back, and they're getting a lot of hype, and they should get a lot of hype. I think they will come close to I think they will have another double-digit win season. I really do.
Too.
They do lose 3 starters on the offensive line, and that could be a problem early on, especially for said Clemson game, trying to get those guys up to speed. But I really enjoyed when Tommy DeVito came in last year. I liked watching him play. Mm-hmm. Not to knock Eric Dungy. I think he is an unsung ACC under-the-radar hero. But Tommy DeVito brought a little bit of excitement. He brought a little bit of electricity with his arm. He's a better passer. I thought that running the football, that Mo Neal kind of grew into that role last year, was really strong at the end of the season. If he can continue that, especially as the interior of that O-line kind of grows into themselves, this offense is going to pick up right where they left off. I know they lost, some weapons at wide receiver, but I think they will be status quo, scoring 38 to 42 points a game. Can they stop anybody? Defensively last year, they got a lot of sacks. They got a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and I think that's going to be key for them.
Alton Robinson and Kendall Coleman are 2 of the best defensive ends in the ACC.
Yeah.
And they make a living in the backfield. The thing I like about Syracuse, though, is that secondary I thought was tested a lot last year, and toward the end of the year, they got a lot better.
Yeah,
and they were young last year, and I know that's the point that Dino Babers is very excited about, is that secondary. They all come back. They're all athletic. They all have closing speed of a state trooper, and I think that's going to be the strength of that defense. I think the pass rush is going to really help them out as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. They had 43 sacks last year. The biggest question I have, Corey, for this team is we just talked about, maintaining success. Is Dino Babers going to have a job of maintaining the success that Syracuse has had and keeping his players motivated? Because, this was kind of uncharted waters for the Syracuse program to have the kind of national appeal that they had. So how big of a job is that going to be to keep his team in check?
I agree, and I think it's just the end that they don't have to worry. And I think what you said about Eric Dungy is completely on the head. But he was also – there was that – how long is the guy going to stay in the game aspect of him because he ran so much. And you don't have to worry about that with DeVito.
Right.
He's the guy that's going to just sit back there and he's going to hit these targets. He's got running backs and Neal behind him. I think there's going to be a little bit more stability to this team because you're not going to be worried so much. And that, to me, will get you over the fact that can you maintain because they're going to be so explosive. It's going to have that Mike Leach back in the day Texas Tech feel to it because they're going to be so explosive on offense. They've got so many weapons, wide receivers, Sean Riley. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And Dungy was great, and he meant a lot to this team, but he ran way too much for my liking of what works in Baber's offense. I think this is going to be a great fit with a full season of DeVito.
NC State. Boy, they're an interesting team. They lost a ton of offensive talent. Ryan Finley's no longer there. Neither is Kelvin Harmon. Emeka Emezi is a really decent wide receiver, but who's going to throw to him? Is it going to be Matt McKay?
I think it is, but who's he going to – I mean, the skill spots that were decimated.
Yeah, running back.
Kelvin Harmon, Jacoby Myers.
Yeah. They lost a lot of running
They lost
back.
a ton of guys all around, along with Finley last year. And I just, to me, they got to set the tone defensively. I think that's going to be a big piece for them. They have to replace 3 starters up front too. On offense, so I mean, this is a team in transition. Mm-hmm. In covering baseball, we always talk about windows, right? And I think the window for NC State being a team that was going to contend for a major bowl game, that window closed last year, and it's going to be a time for them now to try to pick up the pieces.
Not only did they lose all that offensive talent, but they lost their offensive coordinator, Eli Drinkwitz, which I think was one of the key reasons for that offense was as productive as it was.
And would they have even gotten Ryan Finley if they wouldn't have had him there?
Right.
Anyway, because of their connection from Boise State. So, Doran had a great window, and they didn't. Unfortunately, they couldn't capitalize on it.
I was surprised that they were a 9-4 team last year because I actually expected them to fall back to 7-6 this past season. So, I mean, you have to give credit to the coaching staff for keeping them on that level. This is a program that every 4 years is going to pop up and have a team that will win 9 or 10 games. And after that cycle runs its course, they'll go back to 6 wins and start building from there. So they're restarting right now. And like you say, the offense is so young that they're going to need the defense to carry them, but they're also going to need somebody to kind of step up from a leadership standpoint. And hopefully Matthew McKay does take over at quarterback because they've got so many options at quarterback. One thing that worries me about a program like this is when you have like 5 guys that 4 of them you've recruited, and then you have a transfer in Bailey Hockman coming in. So you have all these guys that come in. If somebody doesn't take the job, you run that risk of just rotating random quarterback each week. Yeah. And we don't need to see all 5 of these guys starting this season. So hopefully somebody takes it over. I like Matthew McKay out of all those options. I know Bailey Hockman gets the headlines because of his recruiting stars. I think Matthew McKay is the better college quarterback now.
He had the better spring game.
Yeah, and I think he's more comfortable in what they're doing because he knows this offense and knows this system. But they're going to have to rely on defense. And unfortunately, like you said, Corey, they don't have the front to back them up on defense the way they have in years past. So
last year, they allowed 200 or more passing yards 9 times in the first 11 games. And they still had, it was a struggle. And I still think, that from what we've seen from Doran and being able to get these guys, rally together, they may challenge for 8 wins. They might, but I still think it's going to be the step back they didn't have last year is going to
right. Happen. They delayed it a year.
Yes,
but I agree with you. I think it's going to come, and this division and conference after you get past the top 2 is weak enough that you can absolutely find 8 wins if certain programs start tanking. But yeah, this is a 6-6 team right now.
I find it interesting that NC State is playing every directional Carolina school in their schedule this year. East, Western, and North.
Well, it's going to help.
That's good for the trivia questions right there. All right, Florida State. We talked about them as that team that has fallen on hard times but beginning the recovery. So is there any kind of recovery? Do they get back into postseason?
The uniforms look sweet.
I want to start this one off because I want to pose this one to Corey.
All right.
Because
Go for it.
I know there's a lot of reasons, Corey, for people to be more positive about Florida State this year. I mean, you bring in Kendall Briles on offense. We know that they have some playmakers, and it can't be worse than it was in year one. So I know there's reasons to be optimistic. I'm having a hard time believing it, though, and I feel like I'm on the outlier because I know a lot of people do think there's going to be improvement. So you give me your opinion. You convince me. Why should I be on the turnaround train?
James Blackman.
Okay.
I mean, I think he's a nice piece to have. You know, I mean, Tamari and Terry. I mean, they have guys who you feel like have that old Florida State vibe to them.
Yeah.
But there's not enough of it, and I think that to me is the problem. You know, I think they're just missing that kind of because I think they've lost so much ground in that state, and I think that's part of the problem with it. As UCF's risen, you know, as USF has come back up, they've just not they're just not there anymore, and it's gonna be a long time.
Which is what we discussed in that show.
Yeah, and you know the thing about it when they hired Willie Taggart, everybody said, "Well, he's a great recruiter. He's a great recruiter," but now we're starting to see that maybe those relationships he built in Florida weren't as strong as we thought they were because of other programs on the rise up. They're doing decently in recruiting right now. I mean, they're hoping to end out this upcoming 2020 class mid-15, 16, somewhere like that. But that's not where we think Florida State should be. Florida State should be a top 10 recruiting class perennially. So I think, you know, you're going to have to see better coaching on the field. I love their running back core, of course, who doesn't, but they got to figure out how do they use Cam Akers because Cam Akers.
Yeah, that guy's, I mean, that's a big time.
Yeah, and he was such a square peg round hole. I think he was the most misused player in all of college football last year.
But he was also nursing an ankle injury that really hurt his explosiveness last year.
And you're right on that. But the way that they used him.
Yeah, they used him improperly.
When they used him, you know, he's pass pro and they're sending out other guys, you know, for swing routes on receiving options. It's like, what are you doing? I mean, you know how talented this guy is. He can catch the football. I'm not saying he shouldn't have to block, but he needs to be the kind of guy that you shouldn't go more than 5 plays without him touching the football. He needs to be the lifeblood of your offense. And the other guy that I think they need to use better is Kalen Laybourne. Yeah. Kalen Laybourne has such explosiveness, you know. I know it's Florida, so it's kind of a curse word to Noles fans, but he's absolutely that Percy Harvin kind of guy that you can put in slot, put him in motion and give him, you know, a jet sweep. Get him the football. He needs to be touching the football. And like you said, those Florida State playmakers, they have those guys, but they need to put them in positions to be themselves. And they did not let them be themselves from a skill position standpoint last year. We'll see if Kendall Briles can do that. I want to say he can, but will Willie Taggart just sit back and let him do what he does, I guess?
We wanted Cam Akers to be Dalvin Cook.
Yes.
We wanted him. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry last year. I mean, that's
right.
He is crazy explosive. It just did not happen. I mean, they've got to find a way to get him in space and let him do damage.
And for the love of God, can they block anybody?
Yeah.
I mean, can we start getting some pass pro and some run blocking?
Well, they need to do some blocking because that first game in Jacksonville on August 31st against Boise State is huge.
Marvin Wilson, though, I mean, that guy on defensive tackle for them is an absolute stud. I mean, they still have guys.
Yeah, they still have guys
where 5 years from now we're going to turn around and there's going to be Florida State guys all over the place in NFL.
Yeah,
it's still there. It's just trying to make it work.
I love their secondary. Yeah. I mean, you look at their secondary with Asante Samuel, Akeem Dent, Jaden Lars Woodby. I mean, I think those guys are going to be first to second round draft picks, all of them when they come out. They have lots of talent.
Yep.
But can they block anybody, and can they start the season strong? As you mentioned, John, that Boise State game is so critical just from a mindset standpoint. Just can they mentally get through that block? Because if they win that game, they set themselves up pretty nice. You know, if they start 3-0, they beat Boise State, they got ULM, and then if they can go to Charlottesville and win, if they're 3-0, break out the Tomahawks.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we are getting excited. They're playing with confidence, and then the rest of their schedule, other than Clemson, is pretty manageable. Now, they're not going to run the table, but it's pretty manageable to where you could see them being a 9-3 team. I mean, they absolutely, schedule-wise, could set up for that. But if they lose to Boise, I think Boise will beat them twice if they lose to them. If they lose to Boise, I don't think they go to Charlottesville and win. I really don't, because this team just mentally, when they struggle opening week, it haunts them recently, and they can't get it out of their mind. So this Boise game, to me, is a season setter.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, we move on to Boston College. And the Eagles, arguably, well, let's put it this way. The Eagles' offense is the offensive line moving the earth, Anthony Brown and A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon may arguably may be the best running back in the ACC. He is going to just be pummeled this year. He's going to get at least 30 carries a game.
That's a good debate. Travis Etienne versus A.J. Dillon. That to me is that's a really, really interesting debate between the two of them, because to me, there's depth around Etienne, and he's not going to get the amount of carries that A.J. Dillon is. Dillon to me is a 2,000-yard kind of back, but I think Etienne's more explosive. Dillon's got the workload.
I'm picking A.J. Dillon, honestly, and I like Travis Etienne. And Travis Etienne, to me, you mentioned Dalvin Cook a little bit ago. He is Dalvin Cook 2.0 in the sense that he gets better as the game goes on, and in the fourth quarter, there might not be a better running back in all college football. But A.J. Dillon is the lifeblood of his team. I mean, he is literally the difference of 3 or 4 wins a season, and they can ride him, and he can carry the load. And last year, I thought Anthony Brown did a good job of finding his way of how does he offset A.J. Dillon. You know, they had that marquee game, primetime spot at home against Clemson where it wasn't a good look for Anthony Brown, I didn't think. You know, I know he got injured. He got pressured, kind of, cracked under pressure a little bit. But he had some flashes last year of being a very good weapon for them. And if he can keep growing, they can challenge Syracuse as the second-best team in the ACC. I really believe that. Steve Addazio, they're going to be tough. They're going to tackle. They have some good players on defense. They're always going to be in position. So
they're going to bloody your nose, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're going to bloody your nose.
They're going to get 6 wins.
And if they can get the pretty toys to shine in A.J. Dillon and Anthony Brown, then, yeah, this team could be right up there. I mean, they could grow from that 7-5 to 8-4, maybe even 9-3.
Moving on to Wake Forest, a team that you can pencil them in for 7-5 every year, the way Dave Clawson has built that program. Jamie Newman, Sam Hartman is going to be kind of a debate there. Sam Hartman started most of the games last year until he got tweaked a little bit, and then Jamie Newman came in, and he really kind of moved that offense toward the end of the year. That's going to be an interesting debate, but I love Cade Carney. I mean, he reminds me of Larry Zonka.
Yeah, he's got that Hunter Renfrow 12-year senior thing going now.
All he does is just he falls forward and gains 3 yards.
Yep.
He's like, I guess, more of a modern-day Mike Allstott.
That's exactly who I was about to say. You went old school with Larry Zonka. I was going to go a little bit less older and go Mike Allstott, because that's what he reminds me of.
Yeah.
And it's funny about him because he's not a really big guy. He's not towering and physically imposing, but he runs like he's 280 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, he gained 60 pounds when he gets the football in his hands somehow. He runs so hard. He has pretty good speed too. I mean, he has enough breakaway speed to make those big plays.
He can run by you.
And he's a guy that always makes you comfortable as a quarterback. Jamie Newman really impressed me in that bowl game. I didn't know a whole lot about him, and watching him play in that bowl game, he looked very confident, and I think the quarterback battle is going to matter, but unfortunately for Wake Forest, they've had so many injuries at quarterback that we'll probably see Hartman and Newman anyway.
Well, yeah.
They'll probably both play.
Sounds like a law firm, doesn't it?
It does.
Hartman and Newman. And
or a bad 70s cop show.
Yeah. So they scored 50 points or more 4 times last year, 27 points or fewer 7 times. Find consistency.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing for this team. They have some fun players. Find some resemblance of consistency.
And finally, we end with Louisville. And they've got a coaching change. Scott Satterfield comes in for his first season. And when he walked in the facility for the first time and looked at his roster, he probably wanted to vomit. A lot of receivers, but not enough running backs. Bobby Petrino did not leave anything for him to work with. And he told me at the ACC Football Media Days, the first thing he had to do was repair relationships within the state of Kentucky with the high school coaches. So, he's got a lot on his plate first season. It's going to be a pretty tough year. They'll be hard-pressed to really match the win total from last year. But, Anthony, he's the guy that you and I championed last year. We wanted him to go to North Carolina. There's some other schools we thought he'd be good at. He lands at Louisville, and I think that future, that program now, is a lot brighter that they brought Scott Satterfield in.
They're in good hands, and this is the theme of the ACC for a lot of these teams of what's being done off the field is a bigger impact right now than what's being done on the field. But the benefit that Scott Satterfield has that Georgia Tech doesn't afford is they're coming off 2-10 years, so you're going to improve wins and losses wise probably also. There's two things about Louisville that I think are positive I want to keep an eye on. The first is the development of Jawan Puma-Pass at quarterback. I really like him, and I really think he still has the ability to be a very good ACC quarterback. He seemed like his brain was so scrambled last year, and that Alabama game did so much to just wreck his confidence. And you can debate what was going on behind the scenes with Bobby Petrino. You can debate how invested that coaching staff was, but I didn't feel like he got the therapy he needed to kind of get back on track after that Alabama game last year. So developing his confidence back and getting him to believe in his abilities, because he has ability, is going to be operation number one. Operation number two is going to be, can we stop people from scoring 50 points on us? Last year, they're the first team ever for a Power 5 school to give up 50 points in 5 straight games.
Wow.
They were woeful on defense last year. Now, the good news is they bring in Brian Brown as a defense coordinator. I think he's going to do a good job. Now, doing a good job could mean that they average giving up 33 points a game. But they are going to improve and make those steps.
Twice they gave up over 60 points. If you can cut that down a little bit, I think that's a big improvement.
Jawan Pass threw 12 picks last year to 8 TD passes. Malik Cunningham, the other QB, ended up being this team's leading rusher because the front five was so bad.
Oh, gosh.
So, people really like Mekhi Becton. The tackle there, but they have to protect the quarterback. They've got to allow some development there. They've got to get somebody other than a scared quarterback who has no protection to be the team's leading rusher. So I love the hire. I think Satterfield's going to be great down the road, but this is not a bowl team. This is just a let's start the process.
Well, he's going to be playing some guys out of position.
Let's start the process team.
Yeah, and let's also get some pressure on the quarterback, too.
Yeah.
We only had 11 sacks last year. Let's get a little bit better at that.
This is a huge fall for this team, but this is the right guy to get them back on track.
And I think it's good for him that they hit such a rock bottom that everything they do this year, as long as they want to show up and they want to play, it's going to be an improvement. No matter if the number is 4 wins or 6 wins, it's going to be better than what it was last year because it hit rock bottom.
Yep.
So normally at these preview podcasts, we do another segment where we kind of predict who's going to win the conference. And I think on this one, we really don't need to do that. I think we've already established that Clemson's going to win the Atlantic, Virginia's going to win the Coastal, in our opinion, and Clemson will win the Clemson Invitational, better known as the ACC Championship game.
Yeah,
are we agreed a bit on that?
They'll win the orange and white game. I actually think Miami will be playing them. I believe, and as I said earlier, they both play Louisville and Florida State from the Atlantic. I actually think that Florida State has a good chance of beating Virginia early in the year, especially if they win that Boise game.
Okay.
And I'm going to give Miami the benefit of the doubt. I don't love this Miami team by any means, but defensively, I think that they're better than Virginia, and if they can just get some type of production, if Dan Enos can develop Tate Martell, whoever, N'Kosi Perry, whatever quarterback they go with, if they can score 26 points a game on offense, they'll win the Coastal.
I think one thing's for sure, some team with orange in their color scheme is going to be in the title game.
Yes.
Sneaky.
That is a guarantee. You know who will not be there? A team with garnet in their colors.
Ooh. Shots fired.
Man, he's been in rare form all week since we've been doing these previews.
Yeah, I just busted BC fans' bubbles, by the way.
Well, that'll do it for our ACC preview. Anthony, thanks. Corey, need to come back more often.
Absolutely.
All right. So for Anthony Goldman and Corey McCartney, I'm John Wilkerson. So long, everyone.